Hi, I'm Josh, and here with me is the SP-404 Mark II by Roland. These were announced back in 2021, and at the time I was working on a video as to whether its predecessor, the SP-404SX and A, were still relevant, so that ruined those plans. What I'm trying to say is that I want to talk about alternatives to the SP-404 Mark II, and it's coming from a place of hatred. Okay, but speaking seriously, I think that when you consider how difficult it is to quickly get a hold of an SP-404 Mark II, you can pre-order, but pre-orders are getting pushed back, I think, to like 2023, and there are listings on eBay, but they're either fairly priced but seem kind of sketchy, or they're priced a lot higher than the retail price of the SP-404 Mark II. I think it's worth discussing alternatives. Just so you know the criteria we're working with, to be included on this list, a device has to be able to record samples, to edit and sequence those samples, it has to be portable and able to run off of batteries, and it has to be fun to use, because I think that those are the main selling points of an SP-404 Mark II. I'll also add that it has to be around $500 or under. We're going to have a special guest later on who's going to talk about some devices that are more expensive than the SP-404 Mark II. But in general, for alternatives, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for me to say like, well, you can't get this $500 device right away. Why don't you buy something that costs like $1,000? You know, it sounds crazy. To be clear, nothing on this list is going to be an exact replica of an SP-404 Mark II. Our focus is just on if you wanted to get something for portable beat making and you wanted to be able to get it, within the next couple of days, what would be your options? If you're really set on an SP-404 Mark II and you're willing to wait, please don't take this video as a suggestion that you should instead cancel a pre-order and go out and get something that might leave you dissatisfied. And being included on this list isn't a blanket endorsement for everyone to go out and purchase something. It's more like, here's an idea of something you might want to look into. And if you enjoy the video and you haven't already, please consider leaving a like and hitting subscribe. But let's chat. My first option is software, not a device, but it's so good and so cheap that I felt I couldn't leave it out. Koala Sampler is an app that takes a lot of the functionality of an SP-404 and combines it with things that are, I would say, more unique to a smartphone. So while you can sample using your phone's microphone or external mic, if you've got one that you can hook up to it, you can also load in samples you have stored in the cloud or in your phone's internal memory. Once your samples are in Koala, you can edit them, reverse them, add effects, and even resample, which means recording the audio that's being generated by the app and then bouncing it back into it to play around with more, which is a major feature that the SP-404 Mark IIs are well known for. There's also sequencing, so you can assemble a track within the app. The major strengths of the Koala Sampler are threefold. Firstly, it borrows a lot of what people love about SP devices, immediacy, resampling, and then it even has a kind of similar layout. But most important is actually the fact that it can be on your smartphone. I know that there are a lot of folks, myself included, who prefer using devices that have physical buttons and switches, and an app on your phone might seem like the antithesis to that. But on the other hand, if it's on your smartphone, you're probably always going to have it on you, no matter what, even if you're not carrying like a backpack or some kind of bag that you could have a device in. It's literally the most portable option on this list. There's a saying in photography that the best camera is the one you have with you. I guess here we can say the best portable music making device is the one you have with you. Really rolls off the tongue. Koala Sampler is available for both Android and iOS. If you're wondering why I'm not going to bring up Andrew Huang's iOS app Flip Sampler, that is because I don't own an iPhone and I don't have any experience with it. But it might be worth checking out. It looks cool. Let me know in the comments. Moving on to option 2, it's the Pocket Operator. Knockout. Mine isn't a case, but that's optional as long as you don't mind using the bare PCB. Every Pocket Operator has its own little theme, and the Knockouts theme is sampling. You can record audio into 16 channels. 8 of them are melodic channels, so you put a sample in and then the different buttons are going to play the sample back at different speeds and pitches. But channels 9 through 16 are drum channels. You record in a block of audio and then it slices it up and assigns each little slice to one of the buttons. Samples can be filtered and repitched. You can then edit start and end points. You sequence your samples into short patterns, and then the patterns can be chained to form a larger song. It runs off of AAA batteries, and it's small enough and thin enough that it can pretty easily fit into any pocket on like a laptop bag or a backpack. A major weakness of the P-403 is that it has a maximum 4 voices of polyphony, and every single channel is monophonic, so you can't make a chord in a single channel. You can make a full sounding beat on the KO, but you'd expect to bump up against that polyphony limit pretty regularly. The P-403 is around $100 new. I saw some listings on Reverb for less. At that price, I think that for a lot of folks, it's still going to be too expensive to be like an impulse buy. but it sits comfortably in a range that I would call affordable. You are going to miss out on certain features of the SP-404 Mark II, like the effects. I mean, the Knockout has effects. They're called punch-in effects. The way that you apply them is only like performatively, so it's not the same. All that said, the KO is a really fun and functional little beat-making device. I've made some tutorials with it on, making songs. I'll put a link up in that corner, and yeah, check it out if you're interested. Our third warrior stepping onto the battlefield is the SP-404 SX, a previous SP-404 model. Now, I know that the SP-404 SX is outperformed by the SP-404 Mark II, but if you're after an SP-404 feel, I can't really think of a better place to go than to an actual SP-404. The SX can't repitch all too well, and the sample slicing does feel a little bit clumsy on it, but you still got sampling, resampling, and you can record patterns either quantized or unquantized. The pads are nice and chunky, which makes finger drumming comfortable, and since you can have 8-voice polyphony if you're using mono samples, you can get a good amount of sounds going at once. A major draw to the SP-404 SX is the effects that are on offer, either for the samples that are in it or through the line in. The compressor is iconic, the reverb and delay both sound great, but I think that the real standout effect is the vinyl sim. So even if your samples aren't being pulled from dusty old records, they can at least sound like it. With the SP-404 SX, something that really puts the fun in functional is how easy it is to take off this top plate and decorate it with stickers. You can also swap out these knobs, which is something I actually recommend doing if you get one of these. The stock knobs are really thin. These fatter knobs are a lot more comfortable to turn. If you do some hunting, you can find an SP-404 SX for around $300 to $400, sometimes less. I would say that that's a pretty hefty chunk of change, especially for a device that is now, I think, around 12 years old. But at the same time, it is a really fun device. That's around what I spent on mine, and I do feel that I got my money's worth. Of course, the SX isn't going to give you all the same features of the Mark II. Along with ones we've talked about already, there's the OLED screen on the Mark II, which gives you additional visual information. There's effects that aren't present on the SX, and there's a cool startup screen. But for some folks, the Mark II might be overkill, and the SX could be just right. If you want to see some top-tier SP-404 SX usage, two YouTubers I'd recommend checking out are Raised Ranch and Two-Eyed Boy. I'm going to put links to their channels down in the description. Go check them out, subscribe to them. They're really awesome. Let's move on. Now, I wish I could also talk about modern MPC devices, but I'm just not familiar with any of them. I'm going to hand things over to a special guest who is familiar and can talk about them as potential alternatives to the SP-404 Mark II. I'd like to welcome Jorb.
Hello, Josh. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Jorb. I love gear. That's one of the things we have in common, I assume. We both love gear. The other thing, we share a name. Did you know that? We're both named Josh. I know you are because it's in the channel, but mine's a secret. And you keep that secret too, viewers. Don't let anybody know my real name. Okay, I can't go on a tangent this early. It's not even my video. I'm guessing. I'm like on Pawn Stars when they say they got a buddy who's an expert on these things. Only I'm not really an expert. Anyway, I'm just here to talk to you about the modern MPCs. My music making life and my YouTubing life, I talk about synthesizers mostly, old and new, but when I use them, when I work with them, I like to sequence MIDI, and I like to use MPCs because I really learned how to do this on an MPC 1000. I recently have graduated to an MPC Live 2, and rightfully or not, Josh has asked me to talk to you folks about using the MPC as a beat-making alternative to the SP-404 Mark II. And I'm going to take this in a few different directions. One, ostensibly, they're very different. What the experience you have sitting down an SP-404 and working with it, that workflow can be completely different to the experience of sitting down at one of the modern MPCs. And when I say the modern MPCs, that is the One, the Live 2, the X, now the Key 61, and the Kai Force as well. In some ways, it's reductive to say it's a DAW in a box, but I think that helps you understand the flexibility of the workflow. You can manipulate audio, you can sequence MIDI, you can use built-in effects, you have piano roll track views where you can edit individual notes, and you can plug in USB devices for audio or for MIDI or even a keyboard. So the way I think of it, this is the workstation where I manipulate audio, whatever that means. Is that making a beat? Is that collecting samples? Whatever I would do to work with audio, I use the MPC for that. In my interpretation and for my use case, the modern MPCs are a lot broader than the SP-404 Mark II. That doesn't mean it's better at everything. It just means on paper, kind of, it can do more. Really, it's truer to say it approaches it in a different way. The 404 is a device for making beats. That's how I see it. And if you want to get it to do other stuff, you sure can. But the way I and many other people see them, they're for making beats. So if that's all you want to do, if you're just interested in making beats, can the MPC do that? Yes, it can, and it can do it in strides with a lot of flexibility. I have a video on my channel where I talk about emulating the workflow of the 404. To me, there's two main pillars, I guess, of what makes the 404 workflow unique. That is resampling and punch-in effects. You can do both of those within the framework of the MPC. As far as genre fit, I am of the firm belief that gear is genre agnostic, but a certain interface, a certain workflow will lead you to characteristics that are tropic or indicative of a certain genre. So the 404 will lead you to like a very specific sort of a lo-fi thing. The MPC doesn't necessarily do that. In a lot of ways, you need to carve out your own path more on the MPC. I see that as a positive and as a negative. If you don't want that, or you don't have the drive to do that, or it's unappealing to you to have the option paralysis of this can do about as much as a computer, then maybe it's not a good fit for you. But people it will work for are people who are comfortable learning it well enough to understand what their options are at a given moment, people who will take advantage of its sequencing, people who will take advantage of its built-in instruments. Those are where it stands apart from the 404 and where I would consider it a worthwhile alternative. Josh, you can cut this if you don't care. I mean, starting now, cut this if this isn't important. Price-wise, comparing to the 404 Mark II, a used MPC-1 will be pretty close. But things like the Live 2, the X, and the keys are going to be way more expensive than a 404. So figure out if it's a good fit for you before you say, I can't get a 404 right now, I guess I'll just get an MPC. There you go. I said a lot. I kind of rambled. Josh, I hope that was helpful to you. You, viewers, if you're curious about more MPC stuff, my channel is that way. I'm sure Josh will link it. I trust them implicitly. So anyway, there you go. Josh, thanks again. That's my little spiel for the modern MPCs. I'm a big fan. My name is Jorb. I love gear. Enjoy the rest of the video. Enjoy what you have seen, okay? So long, viewers. Subscribe to Josh. They really deserve it. Okay, so long.
Thanks so much, Jorb. Folks, I've put a link to Jorb's channel down in the description. You owe it to yourself to pop on over and subscribe if you haven't already. It's a really great channel. Jorb loves gear. You're going to really like the part where he says it's Jorbin time and Jorb's all over his synths. I think that meme might already be outdated. Now, there are devices out there that I've heard really good things about, but personally, I'm just not familiar enough with them to feel comfortable including them on this list. So we're just going to suggest them as things you could look into. So why don't we start the might be good alternatives to an SP-404 Mark II, but I don't know enough about them awards. The Electron model samples. It can be found used for under $275. It does require an external battery to be like fully portable without a wall adapter. There's the Korg Electribe 2, which can be had for under $350, and it's pretty cool. I've played around with one, it's worth investigating. And there's the Novation Circuit Rhythm, which can also be found for under $350. I haven't used one, but it looks cool. Find out more about it from people who have one. Inevitably, because I make mistakes sometimes, someone's going to think that there's something that has been left off this list that should have been on it. So if that someone is you, please leave a comment and let me know. And to anyone who's either committed to getting an SP-404 Mark II or who already got one, I'm definitely not trying to say that you're shopping poorly. And of course, there's no reason that you have to rush into getting a piece of gear, though if you're in some kind of gear purchase emergency situation, I apologize for not taking that into account. This is more if you're just hungering for some portable beat-making action and don't feel like you can wait for the SP-404 Mark II. There are alternatives out there that, even though they're not going to be exactly the same, can still give you a fun, portable beat-making experience. All that said, it's ultimately the musician who decides the quality of the music they make with their gear. So whatever you choose to get, and I'm talking to myself here as well, make sure to practice. But with that, it's time to sign off. Once more, let's thank Jorb for appearing in the video. Go check out Jorb's channel. He makes videos on gear, both vintage and new, and he's also a really cool dude. Don't you want to be subscribed to a really cool dude? I'm being kind of manipulative. Thanks for watching. Oh, by the way, I'm on Spotify now, and there'll be a link in the corner, so... And if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't already. I've got new music that I'm planning to release. I'm also working on a review of the Dirty Wave Mate. So, yeah, if that sounds like something that would interest you, that way you won't miss out. Anyway, thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.